Hi, welcome to our June Hot Talk. My name is Becky Rupert McMahon. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. We have more than 300 who have registered through Zoom for our program today. And I know that we've got another couple hundred who are joining us by Facebook. So I'm going to give this just a few minutes here to get organized before we get right into the substance of our conversation. So folks have a few minutes just to get logged into Zoom. So our Hot Talk series is a monthly production that we started in 2016 in response to a bunch of headlines that were hitting hard and fast related to immigration changes that were coming with then new President Donald Trump. And the idea behind these conversations was to be able to get people together on a monthly basis to engage in civil and constructive dialogue on the topics of the day. Our goal has always been to present a variety of different viewpoints and to give opportunity for audience members, whether they're in person or now in the last 80 plus days virtually, to participate by asking questions and communicating directly with our panel of subject matter experts. So we are delighted today to have the opportunity to engage in one of the most important conversations we've been able to convene to date. And I am delighted to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, who will in turn then introduce our panelists. Again, my name is Becky Rupert McMahon. For those that are just joining, I'm the Chief Executive at the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. During today's Hot Talk, you can participate with questions. We received a few in advance. We received a few questions in advance via email. For those that are joining us by Zoom, you can use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. You can also, if you're joining us by Facebook Live, you are welcome to submit your questions directly on Facebook. Let me just tell you in advance, there is no way we are going to get to all the questions that are presented today because they have already begun flowing in. So if we do not get to your question, please do not be upset with us. We will do our best to get through as many as we are able to. And if we will keep all the questions, and if we have opportunity through other means to answer your questions, we'll get them answered for you. But we'll do our best to answer the most commonly asked questions, as well as those that we think are most directly on point for what our presenters are participating in the conversation today. So with that, let me introduce Ian Friedman. Ian is the current president of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, although he is in a countdown the next few days here before his successor, Joe Gross, comes into office. Ian has been with us through 11 and a half months of incredible leadership and partnership in helping to advocate for the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, as well as for our broader legal community throughout Northeast Ohio. So without further conversation, let me hand this over to Ian and say thank you again, Ian, for leading the way.
Thanks, Becky. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here with you. And particularly this Hot Talk now is very relevant during this most difficult time. And we are very pleased and very honored to have joining with us today. And as you can see on the screen, Kareem Hinton. And Kareem is the co-founder and current vice president of Black Lives Matter Cleveland. Kareem, thank you so much for joining us today and doing all that you've been doing. I know that a lot of people, and the reason we have so many people here today is for the respect that you have earned and all of your efforts within the community. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say today. We will also be joined shortly by Joseph Delguyd, who is the attorney for the CPPA, so the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association. He's going to be explaining to us the disciplinary process, the administrative process for officers in Cleveland when an allegation is made. We thought that the format today would be best if Kareem is going to lead off with a Q&A session for about 20 minutes, thereabout. And then Joe is going to follow up with another 20 minutes. And then we will address questions the best we can from our audience. So with that, Kareem, if you could just tell our viewers, those attending, a little bit about Black Lives Matter, which I'll refer to as BLM Cleveland, when it was founded, what the mission is. Just we'd like to know about BLM.
Yes, so thank you for having me for starters. But BLM Cleveland came to be after the murder of Tamir Rice by law enforcement. And, it was in response to the fact that, a 12-year-old was murdered, allowed to bleed out. And everyone knew we were on a course of unaccountability, as has been the trend that we've seen here in Cleveland. And so, we've evolved, and we are also not only are, what we consider first responders, as we come and help the families that might be victims of police violence, the families and the victims themselves if they live to tell about it. But we also inject ourselves into policy and politics, because we want to do things that operate in the best interest of the community. So, when they start to talk about things like, crime that's happening, in the Black community, well, we're addressing the fact that we don't have a school board, and that the person that's over the schools is actually appointed by the mayor. And, we need to go back to a school board, because that appointee is only answerable to the mayor. But if he was answerable to the votes of the citizens, we think that, one, we can vote the better person in, and two, they would do the things that the residents of Cleveland would actually want them to do. And we know that education contributes, or lack of contributes, to poverty, and poverty leads to crime in many cases. And so we're just trying to address the many issues that lead to the problems that we have within our community.
Okay, thank you. So tell me what a day in the life looks like, for Kareem Hinton in your capacity as a representative and a leader in BLM Cleveland. Are you active every day, or are you waiting for incidents to arise? What does that look like?
So, yes, we are active every day. We are a part, for example, we are a part of the Cuyahoga County, the Jail Coalition, the group that basically has led the way in trying to get reforms within the county jail. Before, seeking reforms in the county jail was cool. We've been a part of that, collaborating with them, working with this diverse groups of grassroots organizations and people. We have been, we always get calls from family members and people that know the family members of folks that have been affected by police violence. One of which, we had, received, of the young man who was allowed to bleed out, by a law enforcement officer on the east side, when an officer had the opportunity to stop the bleeding and perhaps, give CPR, but he didn't do it, didn't want to do it, in spite of the training that he supposedly has received and that was mandated by the consent decree that they receive. So, we get those kinds of calls from people involved in things of that nature. We get them regularly. And, we've done things like help folks get groceries. We're just here to aid the community and to be a voice for them. And it's fluid. We never know what that's going to look like day to day.
Okay. So Kareem, if you could tell us, obviously there's the national BLM organization, and is this an affiliate? Are you working in conjunction with the national organization?
So it's a little bit of both. We started off as a direct member of the national organization, one of their offshoots. But one of the things, and we still are actually in direct contact with, all of the members from the different chapters around the country, as well as with leadership. And we actually do defer to them for, guidance on a lot of issues. But because of the fact that things are, site specific, things are unique at different sites, we felt that here in Cleveland, in order to maintain a certain level of autonomy, because there's not a one size fits all way of doing things when it comes to this work, we felt that it'd be best that we become more autonomous, and but at the same time keeping in line with the principles of the national organization and keeping our ties with those in the national organization, because they're doing great work. We support them, they support us, and there's power in unity. Can't hear you.
All right, there we go. Thank you. So I just want to jump on in now. And, you and I have spoken. We're friends and respect everything you're doing. And we've talked about needing to have the conversation about what's uncomfortable, right? So we've talked about in the past, everyone kind of talks a little bit, but now is the time to get to the real issues. And so getting at those issues, Kareem, I'd like you to talk about your feelings, you individually, and where Black Lives Matter stands at this moment as to racial inequity versus equity within the legal process and within the community overall. This is kind of an open question for you as to where do we stand today?
So right now, sorry about that train in the background. Right
New normal today. It's a new normal. So,
right now, where we stand, as a society, as a group, right now we're being forced to look at the inequities that exist. We are being hit in the face with it when it comes to COVID-19, looking at who the majority of the people who are dying because of health inequality within the healthcare system, because of the fact that because of basically the injustices that exist within the criminal justice system. So because Black and brown people are policed in the way that they are the ones that are more likely to go into these COVID-19 incubators, jails. And so these are the folks that are getting it. These are the folks that have the least access to proper testing. So, we're seeing those disparities reveal its ugly head, not only in what we're seeing in the criminal justice system, we're seeing it in healthcare. And then now, as we look at, the jobs aspect with layoffs and so forth, we're seeing it there. So, the folks that maybe had a different job, they're the ones that are getting, when I say decent, I'm talking about financially, that are producing, able to produce a living wage. Those jobs are, Blacks are often the ones laid off first, and the last ones to come back. The Blacks who are working and have been working throughout the pandemic are the ones who are the least paid. We had a fight for $15 an hour minimum wage, and we had folks in our local government fight against us being able to achieve that, and yet they are essential workers. They are making the food and they're placing themselves in danger. So, and these people that work in a lot of these fast food restaurants, they're Black and brown people, they're low income people. And so, just the disparities are really revealing themselves in this time, and everybody, they're having an opportunity to really realize what they're seeing, before their eyes. And I'm hoping that a lot of these things, if shown for being what they truly are, folks will actually start to address them and maybe have a change of heart when it comes to legislation and the things that they support.
Thanks, Kareem. So I want to take it a step further now. There are many out there who say, yes, while there are instances of bad police officers, just like any profession, that there are many good. And so my question to you is that a statement that you agree with or disagree with? And if you could elaborate as to your reasoning.
So that's a statement that, I would disagree with for the most part because um, when you talk about good officers, the good officers are the ones that you see reporting bad officers, stopping bad officers from doing, things that are unethical and illegal. Those and the good officers are the ones that we see that are forced out of the police department because of their stand with doing the right thing, or they're dead because officers don't have their back, as we've seen in Baltimore with the officer who was killed while on duty just before he was set to testify against bad officers. You understand? So when we see those types of things, it's kind of easy to identify the good officers. There aren't many.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Then I guess I'll follow up with that. What can the police do to change your position on that, to increase the number of good officers, where to meet with your approval?
Well, I mean, not that they should be hinging upon my approval or anything.
Sure. But you're in it every day. You know what's going on. So I'm looking to you with your experience. What should the police be doing right now to gain the respect of the community?
Well, here locally, one of the things that they should be doing is they should no longer um, allow their union to be represented by people like Jeff Fulmer or Steve Loomis. They're just playing musical chairs, have been for years. And because these people, they say the most incendiary things, they make brash, insensitive statements against the family members of victims, against the victims of police violence. They are so polarizing, and they incite the rank and file membership, to do things that, they perhaps shouldn't. For example, the former police union president, Steve Loomis, was the one who said when officers were working their secondary jobs, that they should not wear body cams. When it was pretty much accepted that body cams can possibly contribute to telling, more to the story of incidents that happened. And this was a policy that Cleveland wanted to go to, but because they were off duty but doing this extracurricular work, it wasn't mandated. And Steve Loomis took it upon himself to make sure that officers didn't do that. What have they got to hide? Why don't they want to do that? That's that. But it's incendiary statements that he's made against victims like, Samaria Rice and the Rice family. It's incendiary things, things that people like Jeff Fulmer make when Desmond Franklin, who's killed by a off-duty police officer who is shooting from a moving car. Reckless disregard of the general public, and he unconditionally has their back and says things about the victim before any investigation is concluded or well underway. He makes statements about the of these of the person killed, and says that they were committing a crime and that nothing racist or escalating was said on the part of that officer. And so therefore, that taints a jury. So, we have to have those officers, if they don't want that kind of thing, they've got to stop voting those people in. They need to do more with regards to that so-called blue wall of silence, where they don't report other officers. They need to do more than just getting down on a knee. They need to do more than doing a photo op, coffee with cops and things of that nature. And they actually need to call out, officers when they're doing bad. They need to stop voting those wretched police union presidents that they have a track record of voting in. And they definitely need to stop further victimizing the citizens of Cleveland whether it be in person or through the media. But they need to stop all of that. If they could change their culture and actually be a part of ushering in some of that change that's necessary, not fighting against everything, but fighting for the things that are going to help distinguish them from the bad officers. If they do that, then I would say that would be a great identifier.
Okay, all right. So, some of the other issues, I'd like to talk about the consent decree and the police, review commission, the citizens review commission. You've been involved in all of these things. What is your opinion? Are they working, not working? What needs improvement?
Well, for starters, with regard to the citizens review board, it looks great on paper, but it falls very short of actually representing the community and actually being effective, because throughout what we've seen so far turn up from the consent decree, as far as policy goes, there's little to no community oversight. What exists it has no teeth. So you have, for example, on that review board that you mentioned, 9 participants, 5 and 4. City council recommends or selects 4, the mayor selects 5. And, the people that they select are not going to be folks like me that, want true accountability. It's going to be folks that have been a part of the system, that are more aligned with what the city wants and their relationships with the folks that work for the city, work in the city. And so, you've got basically the fox guarding the hen house. They will investigate themselves and find that they have done nothing wrong. And if they do, in fact, rule against an officer, well, you have the safety director and the chief who can override such a decision. So there's no real accountability that has teeth. That's how they designed it. That's how they want to keep it. So that is the spirit of the entire consent decree at this moment. Looks good on paper, but unless there's a culture change where folks are going to want to enforce what's on paper, and unless there's something that stops the way that they can circumvent the collective bargaining agreement, that consent decree is nothing.
Thank you, Kareem. What I'd like to do now for a moment is switch over to Joe Delguyd, again, the attorney for the CPPA, representing the officers. And Joe, I believe you're joining us by phone, correct? Can you hear me?
You hear me?
We sure can. We sure can. Thank you
Okay,
for
good.
joining us today.
My pleasure.
Joe, if you can let us know and talk to those who are attending, if you can tell us what your current position is with the CPPA and what your duties are.
My current position is designated counsel for the CPPA. It's kind of like a general counsel type of position. My particular duties, I'm kind of hands-on. I'm one of the first line of dealing with an issue that comes up. If there's some discipline that is levied, some charges, if you will, a charge letter is levied against an officer, then I deal with the officer. I deal with the charging officer. I deal with the chief's office as it relates to those things. If there's garrity statements to be made, oftentimes I'm
So Joe, I'm going to
sitting
stop
with a
you.
police
'Cause-
officer.
Joe, I'm going to stop you for a second because a lot of people don't know what garrity statements are. So if you could, let us know what that is.
Sure. It's a situation where there may be a potential criminal issue involved, and it allows a police officer to make a full statement that could potentially be used against him administratively, but not criminally. And that's the nature of a garrity statement.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So go on. So let's say that before we kind of get into what happens when Joe Delguyd as the lawyer happens, how does the process start? There's an administrative process. There's also citizens' complaints. And so if you could,
Sure.
this is a good opportunity
Well,
to kind of educate all of us
talk
on these
about,
processes.
Kareem just had a chance to talk about the Civilian Police Review Board. So let me talk about how those complaints come about. The Office of Professional Standards has an office directly across the street from the Justice Center, where their investigators investigate complaints that are made by citizens. They gather information, they take statements from witnesses, they take statements from our police officers. They investigate the case, however they'd like to investigate. We cooperate with them, we give them statements, we give them our wearable camera systems. Again, we're trying the best we can to promote transparency. So that is what we're doing with them. And what then happens is the OPS investigator then submits their proposed charges to the Civilian Police Review Board, who votes to sustain a charge or to not sustain a charge. And so in terms of discipline that is initiated by a citizen's complaint, that is one form that can be done, and it is voted on by the Civilian Police Review Board. If they decide to sustain a charge, it then becomes a pre-disciplinary hearing, either before the chief, and it could be the chief or one of the deputy chiefs, and that's what it normally is, or it could be the safety director. Okay. And again, the chief's office does levy discipline for those situations, and so could the safety director's office.
Perfect. And that is different from the administrative process that you're also involved in?
Well, let me go ahead and continue though with the citizen's complaint, in so much as a citizen can, if a citizen says to an officer, I want to file a complaint against you, pursuant to the general police order, that officer has to provide, he shall provide a complaint form to that citizen. In fact, if they make the complaint and they want to make the complaint against a particular officer, that officer then must tell his supervisor that a citizen has, asked to lodge a complaint against me, and I provided them with, a complaint form. And they don't have a choice in the matter. They have to do it. And they have to, advise their supervisor. And that is another form of, how police officers get potentially disciplined for, citizen complaints, citizen issues. Okay. So getting to your other question, Ian, is that now many times, and in most cases, it is the chief's office that finds some sort of a violation of a divisional notice or a general police order, and they levy what's called a charge letter against a particular member, or who in my case would be a patrolman. I do not represent, the sergeants and above. That's another union. So what happens then is we then have to face those charges in a pre-disciplinary hearing in front of either the chief or the safety director.
Okay. Very good. So, Joe, let me ask you, been a number of issues. Obviously, people are looking to the unions, to the disciplinary process. We know the pain and the hurt that's out in the community. And so I'd like to talk about a couple of the questions I'm seeing here from some of our viewers or listeners. And they want to know about the transparency of the process itself. So oftentimes we see what happens, whether it's on TV, we hear about it on the news. We may see what happens as an end result with the officer who was the subject of the disciplinary inquiry, but we don't know what happens in between during the process. And the question that I have that's been posed is, as far as transparency, are we, the public, able to be involved in the process? Can we go to these hearings like we could a court matter?
Again, you know, these aren't necessarily, they're not public, you know, meetings, but at the same time, I don't know that they're closed meetings either. There are people from the Department of Justice that listen to these every time we have them. There's representatives of the Department of Justice who are at the meetings. So these are people that are, you know, looking over what we're doing, you know, with the division and with the union. So, you know, it isn't like the doors are closed and this is a clandestine situation. This is a situation, and, you know, again, what happens in these meetings, you know, you can file your public records request and you can find out about what happened. You can find out who got charged with what and what was the result of it.
All right, so Joe, I know that I started this off by saying we were going to start with Kareem and go with you, but Kareem is, you know, you have a reaction to it that's clear to me. So Joe, if you don't mind, Kareem, I'd like for you to kind of address, I see that you're shaking your head a little bit to what you're hearing. And so if you can give me your thoughts on this from the BLM perspective.
Well, I do know that with regard to what he said regarding, you know, it just being as simple as filling out a public records request, it's really hard to get the city to honor a public records request unless you're an attorney or a part of some organization that, you know, is a respected part of local politics. And respected, that just means somebody that's going to play ball. And so individuals, grassroots individuals and organizations like Black Lives Matter, groups or folks like Mariah Crenshaw at Chasing Justice, you know, we will fill out these requests, you know, and be denied. I know individuals like Dave Lima and others that are a part of Surge. They will also put in these records requests, and it's a long time before we actually get it, if we get it. And so it's just the transparency thing. It's not really there, and the folks that oftentimes are in the room, they are not representing the rank and file citizens. They're definitely not representing me.
Okay, thank you. So Joe, I appreciate you know, your answers, Joe, and letting us know what goes on, because it is so unfamiliar to so many of us, the inside process. If you could tell us, you know, and of course, every case is different. I understand that, but if a client were to ask me as a criminal defense lawyer, you know, what an average time for a case, you know, to process, you know, it depends, 6 months, a year, somewhere in there. Is there an average time period, or is there a mandate that that an administrative process has to be done in a certain amount of time? So I guess I'm just asking you generally to educate us a little bit on the timing of these matters.
What there is, you know, there's a time limit in terms of bringing charges, you know, based upon when they came to the, you know, the notice of the command staff. But in terms of, you know, disposing of a case, it's much like any other piece of litigation where, again, depends on how complicated it is. It depends on, you know, schedules. It depends, you know, I mean, you're a lawyer. You know that you probably couldn't tell your client that there was a particular, you know, disposition time on a case. Who are the parties involved? Who are the judges involved? You know, so in terms of that, you know, there is a time frame that cases have to be brought. That is a fact.
Okay, all right. You know, what would happen? So let's say, let me just give you a hypothetical, Joe. An officer is going through the process. Perhaps I'll just make something up. He lost his service weapon. Okay, and so he is now before you. You're representing him, and in the midst of this process, we learn that there's a lot more to the story. Okay, we learned that as part of that, he had been drinking, he was in a fight, and witnesses come forward and say, and a gun was pulled on this person. So now we're hearing all these things. What does the police union do, if anything, or who takes action at that point based upon what was learned during this administrative process?
Well, at that point, that would probably happen during a disciplinary hearing, which is like it's almost like a mini trial, if you will. It's almost like, remember when you used to do trials in juvenile court where there was, a magistrate and you're in a small room and, you kind of went through your witnesses, but the rules of evidence don't apply. So what happens there is the individual supervisor is in the room, whether that's a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, that individual's in the room. An assistant chief who is hearing and presiding over the matter is in the room. There may be people from internal affairs in the room. So if this evolves into something like you're describing, they would immediately take that information and move with it to the city prosecutor, move with it to the county prosecutor, move with it to internal affairs for sure. So clearly, this isn't something that, is going to get hidden. I mean, listen, the command staff is trying to do a job in terms of, turning things around. And we're also trying to turn things around. We're not trying to hide things from people. It isn't like you're going to have this meeting and then everybody's going to look at each other and run out of the room and nobody's going to do anything about it. If something happened, in addition, like you explained, that officer would be dealt with.
All right. So, Joe, I'd like to talk about, you've been in the position now for, I think, 3 years, correct? Or thereabouts?
Not quite. Just probably, I'm at the 2.5 year mark right now.
Okay, so about 2.5 years. Can you tell us, and I'm going to come back to Kareem after this, Kareem, so I'll ask you to think about this, where improvement can be made. But my question to Joe in advance of that is, have there been any improvements or advancements that you have seen made by the police in order to regulate and be accountable and show greater transparency in their duties?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of the wearable camera system that every single patrolman in Cleveland wears. The way the rules work is, and they're ever evolving, but they're always evolving in terms of more transparency. The second you get a call, you are supposed to activate that camera so that the second you get out of your vehicle and you start to deal with the public, everything is videotaped. Your partner has that same camera. The cars that come in backup, those guys have that same camera. So, you can't get really more transparent than that. I mean, you are filming these guys 24/7, 365. And frankly, as a union membership, we welcome it. We're not out there trying to hurt people. We're trying to help people. That camera is going to help us because it'll prove that we're doing our job. And if somebody doesn't do their job, it'll prove that too. And, so I'm like I said, short of, there's the AVL situation too, where the automatic, I think it's called the automated vehicle locator system, where with these police officers, if they say they're somewhere, there's going to be proof as to where they are based on that AVL. There's going to be proof as to what they did based on that wearable camera system.
So Joe, a number of questions have come through, a number of them now that are stating that they have had experience with officers not activating their cameras. And the question is, what repercussions are there, if any, for an officer who does not activate their camera? And then Kareem.
At this point, sure. At this point, discipline is automatic. It's like a strict liability situation. If you don't turn your camera on, there's going to be some discipline. The question is just going to be how much discipline. Is it going to be a day? Is it going to be greater than a day? Everything depends on the circumstances that surround you. If you just made the mistake and you inadvertently forgot to turn your camera on. You know, you got involved in a chase and you didn't turn your camera on. You know, something happened very quickly that needed a quick response, and you didn't turn your camera on. You know, you're going to get disciplined even for that inadvertence. You know, so there's no way to escape discipline for not putting the camera on.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So Kareem, I want to go back to questions. Have you seen any improvements? You heard Joe discuss the body cameras and so forth. You know, we know that there are a lot of concerns, but have you seen any improvements? And where do you see the need for improvement by police as it relates to transparency and accountability?
So first, let me say this, that, you know, the Monitor comes out with a quarterly report regarding the progress they're making on the consent decree. The last quarterly report showed that the Cleveland Division of Police and the city have been able to check 9 out of 30 boxes as far as the requirements that they need to make as far as policy changes that are on the agenda for that quarter. 9 out of 30. So you know that they're staying true to what they've always done. They drag their feet when it comes to actually having any kind of substantive change, hoping that all this blows over. This is a tactic that the city and law enforcement has used. If we remember back in 2004, up under Greg White, the city was issued a memorandum, and the city was supposed to make some changes according to this memorandum from the government, from the federal government, to improve law enforcement. Well, that same guy, Greg White, comes in and essentially makes a lot of things look good on paper, but makes it not enforceable, so nothing really changes. Fast forward to 2015, here we are all over again. What does the city do? They brought back Greg White, and to make sure that nothing happens. And so, you know, I really want to drive those types of points home. There's not very much progress that's being made. You have to make a change in culture, but you also have to give community oversight with teeth in this, because people either do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and so therefore they respect you, so they'll do right by you, or they'll do right by you because they're afraid of consequences. Officers they murder Black and brown people with impunity. They have the backing, the unconditional backing of a police union. And so, and there's nothing that the consent decree is really doing that's really able to circumvent, you know, those areas because of binding arbitration, because of that collective bargaining agreement, and because of a complicit and aggressive police culture that exists, that has that backing of that police union. And so, you know, I see no progress at this point, but with announcements that have been made lately and some partnerships that have been formed, change is coming. I'm quite confident of that.
Okay, all right. Joe,
Well, Kareem, if there's anything we can do in that regard, we would be happy to help.
well, I'd like to hear that.
Because-
So,
Because
go ahead.
listen, I personally, okay, I deal with and I speak to police officers each and every day, okay, and they don't want people to be hurt who shouldn't be hurt. I mean, that just makes sense. And when something like that happens, you know, it hurts everybody. And most people that I know become police officers because they want to help people. They want to make sure that law-abiding citizens can live freely and happily. You know, I mean, if there's some change coming and we can be part of that change, we'd like to be.
Joe, you know, as far as lawyers are concerned, you know that our ethics code requires us, if we see another lawyer violate, commit something unethical, criminal, whatever it may be, we have a duty to report. Now, I can't say that all lawyers do that, okay, but that's the rule that's in place. I have a question for you. Is there a similar sort of obligation on police officers to report the bad officers? So I'd like that question, then I'll have a follow-up question for you.
There is a GPO directly on point that, you know, again, if you see a police officer doing something that's unbecoming a police officer, you see another police officer violating the law, that you have to report it to supervisory staff. There's no question about that. The good thing, again, going back to the wearable camera system, is that you're going to be under the scrutiny 24 hours a day, 365 days a year as you work. So not only do we have, you know, the chief's office cracking down on, you know, violations. I mean, trust me, they discipline a lot of police officers every single month. That keeps me employed. So, you know, the wearable camera system will be an offer of proof if there is somebody who, and again, everybody's got it on. So if you were so foolhardy as to turn yours off, you've got 5 or 6 other officers who have theirs on, and you know they're obviously in the same area that you are. So, but at the same time, in answer to your question, your direct question is yes, there is a GPO directly on point.
All right, and so the GPO, some of the people are asking what that stands for, and that's General Police Order, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Ian.
All right. Yes, Kareem.
If I might, I also wanted to say, you know, in reference to those cameras, while law enforcement was pelting people with those rubber bullets and shooting canisters directly at people during the protests 2 Saturdays ago, many of those officers that had that riot gear were not fitted with cameras. So, you know, it's outside of having footage that came from some of the independent journalists that were out there that were also being abused. We have no real record of that, and it's going to be really hard to hold those officers accountable for shooting people in the face with tear gas canisters from pelting people repeatedly with rubber bullets. It's going to be really hard to do that because it just, you know, proves the point that there is a complicit culture to try to get away with what they can. And when they don't have to wear those cameras, or they think they can get away with it and have some type of excuse, that's what they're going to do. And they need, and I understand that sometimes people make mistakes by not cutting those on, but perhaps, you know, there should be some type of mechanism that makes it automatic, that it cuts on anytime that they are responding to a call, anytime that they open the door to get out of that vehicle. Something like that needs to be in place so that we can ensure that, you know, things are being recorded that can possibly help a citizen and clear that citizen, or help that officer and clear that officer if that officer is in fact doing what's he or she is supposed to be doing.
So Kareem, I've got a question for you. As I listen to both of you, and you know, Joe has joined us as the lawyer for the union. I hear about, you know, the chief being present and DOJ people and so forth. I have a question for you, and I have some ideas that I'll share with you, but I'd like your answer. Who should we have as a guest on our next Hot Talk to address these hard issues? These issues that you're bringing up now, who do you think the decision makers are that need to be speaking to the public? Because we have a lot of attendees today who are interested in being part of the solution. We have a lot of media who are joining us today. Who needs to be answering these tough questions?
So I would some of the folks that I would definitely recommend you to talk to, I would say, for example, Sergeant Vincent Montague, who heads the Black Shield, exactly, a Black police organization that only exists because there's racism within a white-dominated Cleveland division of police. I would say that you would ask.
White-dominated, really? You realize that there is not a white man in the position of chief or deputy chief in the city of Cleveland?
Because
you know that
you have a black mayor.
the chief of police is a black man.
The racism that is pervasive.
Are also black
guys, hold on.
A woman and
I'm not a professional moderator, but let me do my best
listen,
here.
Kareem, no, that's just not so. White people do not run the Cleveland Police Department.
Okay, so So Joe, if you could give your support for that response, and then Kareem, I'll ask you to respond.
Was there a question to me or Kareem? I didn't
No,
understand.
Joe, you were saying, I think your statement ended with, white people do not run the Cleveland Police Department.
Well,
So-
again, the chief of police is African American, and these are fine men regardless of color. This is a fine woman regardless of race. So please, I just don't want there to be the misconception that there are all these white men running the Cleveland Police Department when the chief of police is African American. You know, two of the assistant chiefs are African American. The third assistant chief is Puerto Rican, I believe, and the fourth assistant chief is a white female. So you know that's just that's not so.
So what I'm speaking to, one is the culture that is pervasive, that is a white supremacy mindset. I'm speaking to.
Oh,
I'm listen. Let me finish. I'm speaking
come on,
to
Kareem, white supremacy.
Let me
Really?
finish, please.
Joe, let him finish.
Of course I will, Kareem. I apologize.
All right. So what I am speaking to is the fact that, you know, your safety director, last time I checked, his pigment, and I'm a light-skinned male, black male, his pigment isn't as dark as mine. So we've got a white guy who's over that. And like I said, you don't just install a black police chief and think that things are going to get better. The culture remains, and the officers there, because they're so-and-so, like they have these Irish, Italian, and whatever type names, you know, that, you know, acknowledge their ethnic background, they're so-and-so's kid. There's a culture that exists that has and will continue to protect them. And if that is not true, then all we have to do is take a look at two things. One, how many doggone police officers, you can't tell me that the officers are perfect. And so therefore, how many officers
Nothing's perfect.
convicted? Hold on. How many officers have been convicted in court? And tell me why 3/4 of the cases against officers, why are 3/4 of them overturned by arbitrators? That does not mean that they're good officers. That doesn't mean they're not guilty. That just means that there's a flaw within the arbitration system where these officers either are found guilty or not guilty, but there's no middle road. They were guilty of something, and you guys have, or I'm sorry, because I don't want to make this a personal attack, but there's no interest in prosecuting or doing anything about those officers. And the ones, and all you have to do, and you could speak to some of the Black Shield members, probably they'd speak on it better than me, but we could just look at who got protected and who doesn't get protected when there's an attack on, or rather when certain things are being dealt with by officers. The largest graduating class of Black police officers was basically X'd out because there was a scandal about cheating, and things were being done the same way by classes before that and even classes after that. But it was a big deal because people didn't want all those Black officers coming in. And if you, I say, ask some questions, talk to some folks, but just look at how disciplinaries are handed out even within the Cleveland Division of Police. And like I said, you wouldn't have a Black Shield organization if everything was hunky-dory within that division of police. I'm done.
So, Joe, if you'd care to respond, and then I'm going to come back to
Well, again,
closing question.
Kareem was kind of hitting on a lot of different points, so I don't really know exactly what his specific point was. But if there's a culture, you know, that, and I'm going to use his term, and I hate to use it because I don't like white supremacy. I don't like the concept of white supremacy, but I think Calvin Williams would disagree with you. You know, whether there are people that are Italians and Irish people that work on the police force, trust me, wonderful men, you know, like, you know, Chief Drummond, you know, Dion McCauley, you know, a wonderful woman like Joellen O'Neill. Trust me, they're not trying to protect people because they're white.
So, all right, listen,
you know, if an arbitrator makes a decision, Ian, that is the American Arbitration Association, okay? And they're not in some big nefarious plot with the Cleveland Police Department to find against, you know, African American officers and for white officers. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate both of your, your participation by both of you. And what I want to do is just ask a question that deals with a hot topic that has come up in the last couple of days, and a number of our viewers are asking about this. And Kareem, perhaps you can touch on the issue of defunding police departments. We've seen a call for that out of Minnesota. We know, when you hear it, automatically, if people don't understand it, they say, well, what are you going to do without police departments? Well, that's not it. I think what it refers to as an example, we've seen out of reported today, Camden, New Jersey, for instance, did it. It's not just a theory, it's something that's been practiced. So if you wouldn't mind commenting on that and where you stand with that, please.
So, defunding the police and possibly dismantling the police as we know it is, a concept that folks have been trying to champion for quite some time because, in fact, our lives depend on it. And so basically what it is, it's not saying, look, just stop paying the police and put money into the police so that they can just go away and we just not have something there, a mechanism or organization or group of people there to replace it. But what we're saying and what many are saying is this, that we allocate funds that normally go into the police to bolster, for example, the militarization of police, giving them all those paramilitary armaments, that we take that money because they don't necessarily need all of what they're receiving. We take those things or take the money that goes into those things and we put it towards basically the staff, the folks that will be charged with answering certain mental health emergencies, because those people that respond to mental health emergencies within institutions and so forth, they manage to do it without killing people. So we won't have another Tanisha Anderson, for example, who had a mental health emergency and died from positional asphyxiation, which, by the way, is the same thing that George Floyd died from. Officers that had reckless disregard for Black human lives, and so if we have someone that responds to that is capable, they're not going to be armed with a gun, and so therefore they're not going to be inclined to use it when they're feeling cowardly. We would in fact have folks that deal with this that have more cojones than your average person in blue, and they would actually go and save these people's lives, get them back on treatment. That's what we need. What we also need, is to take money, defund much of the militarization because just period, because of the fact that it leads to, more deaths. They need to have take some of that money and put that money into programs, because you're going to go down on and cut down on the ranks of officers, but you're going to go down on the numbers of officers that you need when you start to provide the appropriate services. Stop, with the criminalization of folks that could probably be, saved. For example, someone who's committing a crime of poverty, or someone who has a particular, substance use issue. Well, those people, if they have a substance use issue, those folks actually should be going to a substance use facility to help deal with their issues, as opposed to going to jail. Jail is not meant to be a rehab facility, and prison is not the way to save them. Those things have carceral effects that are ongoing, that are perpetuated, and we need to but by addressing it and addressing the root cause, what we do is we take away from that recidivism. And so when we talk about defunding the police, and that's just a little bit of it, but so when we talk about defunding police, we talk about taking police out of the situations that they shouldn't be in, and and it allows us to then start to rethink policing. And maybe we can get back to what is a peace officer. And that would be an officer that is there to keep the peace. And I'd given the example during an earlier conversation that, we're talking about that officer that comes in and mediates and tries to figure out the best way to handle a situation besides actually arrest. but that law enforcement officer, that they're there to enforce the law. And so therefore that means comply or die. That's why you have people dying if they ran a stop sign. That's why you have people dying if they shoplifted, you know. And so, you know, we want to be done with that. We want that that mythical officer friendly that Black people never knew, but, you know, whites in, you know, middle-class neighborhoods and affluent neighborhoods knew back in the day. You know, we want that. And I think we can get that, you know, if we lessen the burden on law enforcement, if we revamp how law enforcement is done. Thank you.
So if I hear you clearly, Kareem, the call for defunding is not to rid ourselves of police, but to change how they interact in the community and what their responsibilities are. Is that what we're hearing?
That's an oversimplification, but you know, it's policing as we know it. And, you know, and I'll be honest with you, because it's so hard to change a culture, I don't know that I would want to keep a single person, you know, that's in Cleveland Division of Police. If they were talking about changing it, I don't think I'd want to keep a single one, you know, have a single one remain once things were changed over, because we don't need the old school ones with that just exude that negative culture. You know, I've had the privilege of speaking with the wives, family members of officers in training that were not people of color, that were training with these veteran officers, and they told stories about, you know, the code words that they use for Black people, or just the blatant usage of the N-word, and the way and the difference in which they treated Black people, brown people, and whites. And so, you know, yeah, I'm all for getting rid of them all, but I know that that is not, you know, a pragmatic approach. That's not realistic. So we just have to create new training, really root out the worst of the worst, and then maybe eventually we can get there.
Okay. Thank you, Kareem. Joe, I'm going to conclude with you, and I would like to say, as for the hot talks, I can see the number of questions that we have here, and it's an incredible number of questions. As Becky said, we anticipated we wouldn't be able to get to answer the majority of them. I don't think any of us could have anticipated the numbers of questions that have come in. This is clearly an issue. What that evidence is this is clearly an issue that we have to continue addressing for many reasons, but it also, you know, our hot talks, this is a perfect example of what we at the Bar Association can do by convening people from all different sides to help educate. I appreciate both of you being here. And Joe, I would ask just an open question very quickly. What is it that you would like the community to know about the process, the police review process and disciplinary process that they may not know and should?
Okay, well, let me speak a little bit to the defunding issue for a second, because I know it's not an answer to your question, but
no,
the Cleveland policemen do earn so little money that they're virtually defunded in terms of their salary as it is. These are people that do a very, very difficult job trying to protect people. I mean, again, Kareem is entitled to his opinion about everything, and that's the great thing about this country. Everyone is entitled to their position. Everyone's entitled to their, you know, opinion. And at one point he said, I'd get rid of them all, okay? Trust me when I tell you, you don't want to get rid of all the Cleveland policemen. Clearly, you probably don't want to get rid of 95% of the Cleveland policemen. Sure, there may be a bad one here or there, no question. That's the way life is. Everywhere you go, there's not perfection. But these are guys who do a very, very difficult job. And again, you know, the DOJ is here. They are scrutinizing what's going on. We're not fearful of this, Ian. We greet it with, you know, acceptance. We greet the wearable camera system with acceptance, because we want people to know that we're out here doing a good job for you. Listen, you know, we talked all about, it's been terrible, you know, when people get killed by police. But fortunately, nobody's been killed by the police in the last 3 years that I've been here. And nobody has been brutalized in terms of a significant police brutality case in the last 3 years. So to my mind, that's improvement. You know, this is what we're talking about right now. This is what's ignited in the country, is that what happened with this guy in Minnesota. Okay, that won't happen in Cleveland, Ohio. Too many checks and balances, too many good people working, too many good people supervising.
Well, thank you, Joe. You know, Kareem,
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I obviously want to thank you both. Kareem, in addition to the law enforcement officers that you've recommended, I'm going to say it now while there are a lot of people here. I'm putting a call out to the mayor and Chief Calvin Williams to also speak so that we can put these questions to them. I think the community deserves to hear from them and should hear from them. So that will be when we conclude here today. Those are going to be the calls that go out. I hope that they are willing to speak with the community, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. That's not the only, but that is a good way to help move forward, is to open up any communication.
Ian, if you would give Kareem my phone number, because if there's anything we can do as an organization, the CPPA, we want to do it.
Kareem,
you know, the chief's office makes their own decisions for what they do, but if there's anything we could do, we want to do it.
Kareem, I will be providing you Joe's cell phone number, and I hope that the dialogue is a start. I will say this is all of our hot talks are named hot talks, but this one gives it greater meaning here today. This could go on and on all day. I appreciate you both joining us. I think it's clear that this is a dialogue that must continue, not just with Kareem and Joe, but so many of the stakeholders. The Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association is committed to help facilitate these dialogues and bring the public into these debates. So Kareem, Joe, I thank you for both being here today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I will.
Ian, before you log off here, so I too want to extend my thank you to Kareem and to Joe, and also to you, Ian. You're absolutely right. This is exactly the kind of conversation that we need to continue having. Our next conversation that we do have scheduled is Monday, July 13th, when we're convening a conversation around the call for a statewide criminal sentencing database to help examine the issue of what sentences are given to create an opportunity for more consistency in sentencing. The conversation on July 13th at noon will involve Justice Mike Donnelly from the Ohio Supreme Court, 6th District Court of Appeals Judge Jean Zamuda, our own 8th District Court of Appeals Judge Ray Hedden, and also Sarah Andrews from the Ohio Sentencing Commission. So we hope that all of you will come back to join that conversation on Monday, July 13th at noon. And as we continue to extend invitations to the mayor and beyond, we will continue to host these dialogues that are so important and critical, in particular because they are civil opportunities for us to exchange our viewpoints and to find common ground where we're able to. So please join us again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Ian, Kareem, and Joe. Oh, and Ian's giving me one more finger.
Yeah, just one comment that I'd like to make to all of the people who did submit questions that we were unable to get to. Please know that we do have these questions down, and this is helping to shape the dialogues that need to go forward. So if you feel that, great, I asked a question and I didn't get an answer, please know that there is great value in all of the questions that were submitted, because even though we couldn't ask or have them answered today, we intend to use them to answer them looking ahead. And so thank you all for joining us today. Kareem, Joe, thank you. Becky, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone.